Well, joining me now to go over this week and a half of the new minority parliament just before they head off to their constituencies for the Christmas break are three MPs from the different parties. Arif Virani is a Liberal MP for Parkdale High Park in Toronto, and he's also the new Parliamentary Secretary to the Justice Minister. James Bezan is a Conservative member for the Manitoba riding of Selkirk-Interlake and his party's defence critic. And Daniel Blaikie is the NDP member for the Winnipeg riding of Elmwood-Transcona. He's, among other portfolios, the international trade critic for the NDP. All three of you, thank you for joining us for this last panel before the holiday season. Can we start with what people are still buzzing about on the Hill, and that is the announcement yesterday by Andrew Scheer that he's stepping down as a Conservative leader. James Bezan, everyone's still talking about it. Two questions to you. Andrew Scheer's announced that he's going to stay on as interim leader, but there's still a lot of party members who are angry about this news that his children's private education was being paid for by party members. Should Mr. Scheer stay on? Should he repay that money? That's a question that's being asked in Conservative circles.
Last night, Conservative caucus members voted unanimously to keep Andrew on as our interim leader until we find a new leader and we can go through that process next year. I can tell you that all of us want to thank Andrew for his service, and we know that it was a very difficult decision for him to make to step down, but at the end of the day, he wanted to do what was in the best interest of his family, for Jill and the kids, and also to make sure that we have a strong, united Conservative Party. So difficult decision, but one that we all respect him for, and we look forward to continuing to serve with him because he's still going to be in caucus and he is the interim leader. Okay,
but I mean, a quick question. When you go back to your constituency, do you think some party members, because we're not hearing this from non-Conservatives, might be a little peeved about the fact that party donations were being used to top up private education of his children?
First and foremost, this was something that was done by the rules within the Conservative Party of Canada. It's regular type of compensations that's offered as well to other political leaders and other parties. And we've got to remember that this is Conservative money. It's not taxpayer money. It's not hiring nannies for the Prime Minister. This is Andrew had his children in private school. It's the differential between the cost of tuitions in Regina versus here in Ottawa to go to the school here. And so that is a family choice and a choice by the party that they made the offer to him as part of compensation that he has to serve as the Conservative leader.
Okay, quick question, because I want to get to your Liberal and NDP counterparts in a second, but they are all waiting to know your answer to this one. That is, how soon will you have a new leader?
That I don't know. The National Council has to meet, has to set out their guidelines. We do have a convention that's already for policy and constitution that was set for April. I don't know if we're going to try to dovetail these all together or whether or not we go down a different process path or delay convention. But in my personal opinion, I think the faster we can do this, the better. I think it would be a great accumulation to have the vote for leadership take place at our scheduled convention in Toronto in April.
Okay, Arif Virani, when you watch all of this, obviously this is sort of taking a lot of the oxygen in the last day or two of the session. What difference does this make to Liberals as a Liberal government? You now have a leader who's the interim leader. You now have the prospect of a maybe earlier than anticipated a new leader for the Conservatives. Does it make any difference to you as a Liberal government?
Well, I just want to say at the outset that all parliamentarians across all party stripes respect the work that Mr. Scheer has done and the sacrifices he made as a public servant, the contributions he's made to Parliament, and wish him well in his next endeavors and recognize the service that he's provided. In terms of how it changes things, I mean, we are governing in a minority parliament. We're conscious of that. We are working across party lines, seeking cooperation of parties on an issue-by-issue basis. It doesn't change anything in that regard. It has just been something that's been dominating the current media cycle, but it doesn't change sort of the work that we've been put here to do, which is to address the things that we've outlined, which are mainly climate change, things like gun control, affordability, taxation rates for middle income earners. Those are bread and butter issues that Canadians want to see us address, and we're going to continue to address that and working with other parliamentarians wherever we can.
Okay, Daniel Blaikie, does this affect the NDP in any way? Some people have suggested that as a fellow opposition party, you now have the Tories who are going to be in a certain transition mode as they choose different committee chairs, they choose different critics' portfolios. Those all could be affected with a new leader coming into place eventually. Does it affect the NDP in any way?
Well, we came here to work for Canadians and to try to get something concrete out of this Parliament. So I mean, that's what we're focused on. That's what we're going to continue to do. You know, we know a lot of folks across the aisle who aren't the leader that we've worked with on committees and in other ways, and we're going to continue to try working with all parliamentarians as best we can to get something concrete done for people. So I mean, nothing changes in terms of our mandate or our approach. There's going to be negotiations with other parties. We already knew that. If the Conservatives decide to take different positions in those negotiations because of their leadership campaign, then we'll negotiate based on the positions that they present. But I don't think that this obviously changes anything for us in this Parliament.
Okay, a question.
Let me just add on that, because you know, Andrew's still going to be the interim leader. We still have the job to do that Canadians elected Conservatives to do, which is to hold the government to account. We are the official opposition. We want to address the issues surrounding national unity, surrounding the not getting our energy products to market. We want to make sure that we hold Justin Trudeau to account. And Andrew's going to be standing toe-to-toe in the House of Commons every day between now and that leadership convention. Okay,
quick question. While I've got you as a Conservative there, Mr. Bezan, has your party come to a conclusion as to whether or not you will, because one of the first things you'll be seized with when the Parliament comes back is NAFTA and the ratification of NAFTA. Have you decided definitively whether or not you will be voting for the new NAFTA package?
We just got briefed on the NAFTA deal yesterday, so we're still in the process of going through how this is impacting upon the aluminum industry, on our agriculture sector, and we have to make sure that there is protections there to safeguard market access for the rest of our industries. So we still have to take the time to study this through. We're not just going to rubber stamp it. You know, President Trump had the decency to actually make sure congressional leaders of both Republican and Democrats were part of the negotiation process. We weren't consulted as opposition parties on this final deal that we seem to have gotten signed just earlier this week. So we want to make sure that it's properly studied, and we're going to take our time to make sure we get this right.
Is it legitimate, though, to assume that you'll probably end up by supporting it because you are a party of free trade and turn your back on this?
Just going to say that, you know, we are the party of free trade. We believe in trade.
So it would be hard to vote against this one, would think.
But we also want to make sure that this has got it right. We said before the previous final deal that it was NAFTA 0.5, and this one looks like they've even given up more concessions to the possibility of having Chinese aluminum come in through Mexico, which will displace aluminum up here and also impact our auto industry. So, you know, these are issues that we're very concerned about, but we want to make sure that we have the safeguards, that the automobile industry here will continue to grow and prosper, that our agriculture sector can still access and export. So this is an important deal, but we're going to make sure we get this right. Okay,
Daniel Blaikie, as the international trade critic, I know you have been studying this and you've been asking for more time to study it, but is your party closer to leaning closer to opposing the NAFTA deal, given that there were a lot of measures that were won by labor interests in the United States? So would you be inclined to oppose this deal or to vote for it?
Well, we're looking seriously at what those changes are. We recognize that there has been some improvement over the original version of the deal. You know, one of the interesting features of this, you know, the NEP has always been concerned about the impact of trade deals on government's ability to act in the public interest. And so for the first time, there's some trade-offs in that regard with the elimination of the ISDS provisions and a couple other things that I won't lay out all those details.
But you have massive concessions in terms of getting rid of all the pharmaceutical things that you were concerned with. You have the labor movement singing the praise of the labor measures in this and how they apply to Mexico.
Yeah.
This doesn't
so there are definitely things for us to be looking at. We are looking at them. One of the things that hasn't changed, though, from a number of agreements, most of them, in fact, is the secretive way in which they're negotiated and the way in which our government doesn't actually tell us what their goals are at the negotiating table. The U.S. government does. So we've got a process where Parliament and Canadians don't get involved until the deal is already signed. The government's not transparent about its goals. That's as true under Conservatives as it has been under Liberals, and that should change. And I think we're at a moment here where there's an interesting discussion around trade in the country, and the government should be seeing this as an opportunity to set, not just to have got foreign politicians successfully arguing for wins for Canadian workers, but also how we build a better process so that our own government can actually really champion progressive change in trade negotiations going forward. So we're looking to them for some signs that isn't just a one-off because people in other countries, similarly with CETA and Wallonia in Belgium, where all of a sudden for the first time we heard a criticism of investor-state dispute settlement clauses from the government because Belgians were angry about it. We should be able to have a government that listens to the voices of Canadians who have legitimate concerns. We need a better process to do that, and we certainly have our eye on that.
Okay, Arif Virani, a question that many people have. It has been floated that the Prime Minister could call Parliament back early in January to seize them with this ratification legislation. Is that in the plans, do you think, or are you ready to wait until Parliament comes back as scheduled in the last week of January?
Well, Parliament is still scheduled to return at the last week of January, so I'm not going to speculate on whether it will resume earlier, but I want to respond to a few things that both Daniel and James have mentioned. So, first point is that in terms of telegraphing how the negotiations were going and what we were pursuing, I think Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau were very clear that we were pursuing a progressive trade agenda. We were pursuing implementation and enforceable chapters on the environment, on labor. We put in for the first time language about Indigenous individuals and on women. That was telegraphed right from the outset. To James's point and to Daniel's point about ensuring that Parliament is consulted and considered as part of this process, that's what we will be doing when we return to Parliament. We will be tabling legislation in the House in order to implement the full ratification of this treaty. That's when the opportunity will come for all of the parties in the chamber to provide their input into this deal. And in terms of our commitment to aluminum, as James mentioned, I don't think anyone can doubt our resolve on aluminum. We had people who were urging us about 10 months ago to take any deal rather than have no deal. That's not what we did. We ensured it would be a good deal. When tariffs were imposed on aluminum and steel, we retaliated with reciprocal tariffs, and we had those successfully lifted. And now we've got a situation where aluminum workers, because of the rules of origin requirements, will have 70% of aluminum made in North America involved in the manufacture of those products. That's better than the zero that we have now as the status quo. So those are all significant improvements, and that's what we stand by, that record.
Okay, on that note, I want to thank all three of you. It's been a relatively short sitting, fall sitting of Parliament, but I want to thank you very much, and I want to wish you a happy and productive holiday season as you head back to your ridings. Thanks for speaking with us.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.